Wide angles, I love them, and once you get into them you just have to keep going wider. 28mm is not wide, it's a slack 35mm. 24mm is a compromise, and who likes compromises? To be in a really wide club it has to be 21mm, or for the ultras 18mm or wider, but it can be hard to work with at first. But put a little bit of effort in and you get a whole load of wide goodness back. Here's how to do it, but first of all, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, an online learning community where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. When you first look through an ultra-wide lens, the look can be mesmerizing. Now, the most obvious characteristic of an ultra-wide or hyper-wide is that you'll get a whole load of extra detail by the bucket load. It will just hit you with how much visual stimuli you can pack into that same amount of megapixel patch. It's like your photos have just been injected with a whole load of extra life. I wonder if you can actually inject a photo with some life. Need to check that out. But when you open up all these little extra elements, you'll soon realise that although it looks cool at first, some of them are just too distracting, or some stuff you don't really want to be showing in your frame. It can be too revealing. You might end up showing more than you really ought to be showing in your image. It might seem like you're offering more by showing more, but you have to remember that photography is about being selective about what you put in the frame, even when you choose a lens that allows you to see more. The problem is that with an ultra-wide, it's a sucker for the details. It literally sucks it all into your photo. Excluding distracting elements will be one of the biggest challenges with using an ultra-wide, especially given that some distracting elements have legs, although sometimes that fix isn't too difficult. Alright, so what can you do? Well, you can compose it without those distracting elements, right? Well done, Smarty Pants, top tip, yay! But what isn't so easy to fix is the fact that the shot is boring. Well, while you're in Photoshop, I suppose you could shop an erupting volcano in the background. Yeah, okay, maybe not, but before you start making interesting photos, know how to handle the quirks of a UWA. That's ultra wide angle, it's not some kind of airline. But there are things you need to bear in mind before you compose your shot. With wide angles, you have this kind of push-pull effect. The closer you have something to the lens, it kind of looks like it pulls in closer to the lens, but the stuff that's far away gets pushed even further away. So when you're standing on the spot looking at the scene, the beauty might not transition well into your image because an ultra-wide will essentially make it look like you've taken many steps back. In a wide open space, it can make your image look really empty because everything seems far away. It would just make Robert Capa lose his shizzle. I'm losing my shizzle. I mean, the best way to remedy this is, as Bobby once said, is to just get closer, but he's probably using a 50mm lens. With an ultra-wide, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not smelling your subjects. Get close, and then get even closer. Once you've done that, get even closer. Then you're on your way to getting a decent shot. And getting disapproving looks, perhaps. I guess you got to bear in mind social distancing though, might be problematic. But anyway, one cool thing with going ultra wide is that you can get away with not caring too much about focus. Pretty much everything is in focus anyway. If you have to focus manually, scale focusing is easy because the amount of stuff in focus is quite wide. If you're auto-focusing, it would be a failure of epic proportions if your image somehow ended up out of focus. And you can just aim your camera in the right direction and you'll get something that's not too terrible. You can, but not too terrible is not what we're after, and certainly not dressed as Elvis or whatever Kim is dressed as. So repeat Robert Capa's quote 3 times in your head and you'll be fine. Point is, if the interesting stuff gets pushed further away, you need to get closer to it. Foreground interest is important, but don't think it necessarily needs to be the main subject. You can use the ground, the wall, shadows, the little details, just as long as it's not too blank. Ultra-wides have a crazy effect on lines. It has a cool, wild look with converging lines. It all falls into the centre so sharply. You can use those dramatic lines to lead your eye towards something of interest, or the lines can be part of the interest. Those lines become such gorgeous visual feasts with UWAs, and you can't have too much of a good thing. You just have to be quite careful with how the lines look in your shot. You have to be quite precise with your framing more than a standard lens. Like with this shot I was framing up, it looked good in the viewfinder as far as I could tell, but even a slight movement of the camera and that will end up messing up your lines. That really irks the OCD-ness in me. Especially as personally with ultrawides, I do like to have some nice symmetry, line things up slap bang in the middle of a shot, so I want to have a line that goes from one side of the frame to the other, to be level. It really does help to be obsessive about those little details when you're framing. Use the grids in the Finder or LCD. But when I don't want to ruin the lines of OCD-dom, I have to bear in mind the whole push-pull effect, exaggerating of those lines. To get everything looking normal, you have to have the camera as parallel to the subject as possible. Otherwise, it's not just the lines that will look mad, as walls will be falling backwards or forwards, but your human subjects won't be too pleased with how they end up looking too. They might get elongated limbs or body parts. Well, maybe some people might find that handy. With human subjects, you have to be extra careful unless you want everybody to look like a freak. But otherwise, for other subjects, the exaggeration is why you will love this lens. Look, it is a great lens to use in tight urban environments to pick out all the detail and to exaggerate space. Use an ultra-wide to expand the limitation of what you can see in a given space, otherwise you might just end up seeing more of nothing, more boring sky, more nothingness ground. I think a good place to start is an ultra-wide zoom because then you can look through the range from wide to ultra-wide to figure out what is needed. With a prime you need to think beforehand whether you really need to go ultra-wide. I'm a big fan of using it in tight city spaces because of all the buildings and hard edges that surround the subjects, which with an ultra-wide angle ends up framing the subjects in such a dramatic fashion. Compact rooms could look absolutely massive. Great lens for real estate agents. Walk-in wardrobe, obviously. And here we have the internal lobby area. It looks quite compact and tiny, but in fact I am huge, so that's why it looks like I can take a crap while having a shower at the same time. Yeah, ultra wides can be good for putting a subject into context with an environment with lots of detail. It's not about isolating the subject from the surroundings, so you just focus on the subject, but using that as extra detail that you have to be careful what you choose to put in. They are fantastic lenses that can produce visual feasts. It tests you, it makes you think and study that scene through the viewfinder more than with a standard lens. You can use it without overthinking the shots, fire from the hip, but you'll make better shots with your ultra wide by understanding its quirks and its benefits, not just using it for the sake of it. A bit of effort is required to understand it, but maximum amount of fun is guaranteed. You should try it. I think you might like it. Anyway, now we're coming to an end. This video was sponsored by Skillshare, an online learning community with thousands of lessons, including this fantastic set of lessons by 6 Street Under. His street photography is superb and it's insightful to gain an understanding of how he works and how this could work for you and improve your street photography. It's definitely worth checking out if you're into street, or even if you're not. You can get full access to it and over 25,000 classes about photography, business, design, and knitting, and much, much more for less than $10 per month. Although you lucky people can get a 2-month free trial by using a link in the description box below. Thanks for watching.